everyone. Welcome to Shred the Veil. I'm Daniel here with my brother Derek, and we are the grandsons of Daniel Salter, who was one of the 21 witnesses in the 2001 Disclosure Project. He was one of the 21 military personnel that came forward, expressing their encounters with UFOs and ET technology. And grandfather claimed he had a clearance 38 levels above top secret. And it's been our mission over the past 20 years to investigate that further and see what the truth is behind, the narratives that we hear these days. And so here we are on Shred the Veil, and our um, guest today is Chris O'Connor, and I'm really excited to share his story and the things that he's uh, come across in his lifetime and the things that he's developed to help shed the veil on a lot of aspects of what's being hidden right now. So I'll do a quick intro here for Chris. Um, he has come up with his own technology device called a Divine Evolution Electromagnetic Microsingularity device, which was used in the Secret Space Force for reprogramming memories as a way for the body to regenerate itself more quickly. Um, and he can talk to us more about that and what it was used for and what he sees his device being used for. But Chris served 60 years in the secret space program for the United Nations as an intergalactic liaison from 1970 to 2030 and returned a 2-year-old looking clone body. During his time on Saturn station, he was tasked as an intergalactic intuitive liaison to negotiate trade agreements between different ET races. Based on his off-world experiences, he was able to create his own medical healing technology, which he calls the DEEMS device. So welcome, Chris. We're very excited to have you here today.
Oh, thanks. I'm really happy to be here with you guys today. So it's an honor. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to share the technology that you have created. But before we get into that, I think it'd be appropriate to go into your background and your experiences with Saturn and how it all started for you. I guess it started at a young age, and if you want to just kind of tap into that real quick, we can ask questions along the way and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you say, I was born in 1968, and when I was 2 years old, I was actually taken by the U.S. military. Now, I don't know for sure if it was the Air Force or the Navy. I feel like it was Air Force, but I don't. That memory isn't exact. But it was just one single man. Long story short, I was in my crib, standing there and kind of looking into the living room. And suddenly this man appeared right in front of me. He was all in like what we would call, well, like a uniform, but like dark blue. And there was no distinguishing marks that I remember. I'm only two, so I just see, you know, basic things. But he had a hat. I remember the hat. And then he just kind of reached in and picked me up. And then suddenly we were somewhere else. And he was walking down the hall, and it was kind of funny because he was like really uncomfortable. I could kind of tell him, thinking back now on the memory, he was like kind of holding me out and under the arms, like just barely
Mhm.
doing it. But it turns out later he became my handler, what we call a handler, and my superior officer, if you will, later. But that was my introduction. An introduction to this man was him taking me. So anyway, he takes me into what is a lab, and he walked down this hall and then enters and hands me over to this woman. And there was another person there, but I don't really remember them. I just remember them being behind her. And this woman then, I wasn't very dressed as that I recall, but I just remember her undressing or taking off whatever I did have, and then using like what we call handy wipes now, and wiping me down. And I guess that was, I don't know, for bacterial, cleaning off whatever, killing everything, like before surgery when they wipe you down, sort of thing.
Mhm.
So she did that, and then she turns around, and there's this tube, acrylic tube or glass, I don't know. Look, it was clear, big enough, a couple of feet or so, big enough to place me in because there was opening at the top. So a horizontal tube, and this tube was filled with like a gel. It wasn't like a heavy gel, it was just thick water. But it was like a pink purple kind of a color. I do remember that. And when she takes me and she sets me in there, and now, because I'm two and her hand is really big, so it's like covering my chest and belly. She puts it on me and she pushes me down into the gel and kind of compresses my chest to get the air out.
Wow.
And
Did
of
she
course,
submerge your head in?
my whole body,
Okay, yeah.
everything is in it. And they compressed to get the air out, and then I would take this fluid in, which I did. And I don't remember much about it because I was just frightened, of course. And then I remember trying to breathe, and I just was, freaking out in my little brain. But then really what it was is after a moment, I realized that I was okay, though it was harder to take inhalations because it's water versus air, but I was okay. And there was also an anesthetizing quality to this gel, which actually numbed anything so that if I would have felt pain in any way, I would have been numbed. Turns out, I found out a lot about this later, of course, that this gel is I don't know what they call it. It's like a biogel. So they grow the gel based on your DNA. So that gel is elements of you, like T cells and whatever.
Mm.
So that when you're drowned in it, your body accepts it completely. It doesn't reject it. Uh,
Right.
and
Huh.
then I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Wolverine Origins when they first go in to
Yeah.
metallicize his bones
Yeah.
and put in
He's in a
needles into
tank.
his bones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
I freaked out when I saw that because I'm like, oh my God, that's what they did to me. Because I thought that was I thought I was crazy. I didn't think that was a real memory until I saw that. Then I realized it is a real memory,
Oh,
many of
Wow.
the aspects of it. Well, they didn't put it in the bones necessarily, but with me, because I was in that little tube, they had like these little black, like bunghole little things where, it's like rubber. You kind of stick a needle in and it stays sealed all around the tube. So now they start injecting or putting these large needles into my body. And again, I didn't feel pain. I felt pressure, but because it was, anesthetizing, it didn't really hurt. It was just scary.
Mhm.
But anyway, so they put it in to different parts of the body. Now, what they do that for is because they need to inject that same gel internally so that because it's a growth gel, rapid growth gel.
Mhm.
So that when they're growing your body very rapidly, all your body internally, externally, it all grows at the same rate.
Right.
For one
Right.
going in the back of my head and a couple on the side and and throughout the whole body. But then I don't remember much of anything after that. Um, I don't know if they put me out or it was just too traumatizing, or I mean, like this wasn't traumatizing enough.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so I don't remember much of anything until what I found out later was like 4 or 5 weeks later. And so then they had moved me from that small tubular thing into a larger one, enough for an adult. And so over about 4 or 5 weeks, this gel rapidly grows the body. And so now my body was like a 25-year-old type of, size and very healthy, idyllic, body so they grown my body, but now I'm a 25-year-old body with a 2-year-old brain. That doesn't really quite work.
yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, to be honest, I know a couple of people that might have. But but anyway, so what they do now, because it takes a couple of days or so, because I do remember this after they took me out. I don't remember being in that bigger tank. I only remember after they had taken out all the needles and then they were draining it and then to let me out or get me out. But they had to treat me like I was 2 years old because that was my brain. And
Mhm.
I remember for like 2 days, they just had me, like in a like a hospital bed or something. And I was just crying and I was upset and I was just traumatized and just all of that stuff. So that was a couple of days, of that. And then after that, I calmed down, after a day or two. And then they were able to come in and then unlock my memories, which is an easy thing to do when you know how to do it. And so they did that. As soon as they
Unlock
unlocked,
your memories that you hadn't had
well,
yet, though. But
all of my memories, so I remember that I agreed to do this before I was born.
okay.
Mm.
See, I
Mhm.
remembered that. I remembered that I had a soul family. We had come to the U.S. military uh, because I wanted to be incarnated and then work with the military to do disclosure and to do um, work with other races as a
Mm.
liaison. I mean, that's what I wanted to do, and that's why I was doing this, and that's why I was born. And the reason you have to do that as a caveat is that many, many, many millions of entities, other races have come in wanting to be of assistance to humanity as we're in this evolutionary phase.
Mhm.
Now, benevolent forces will not come down and just appear because most or many people don't want to know they exist. And so there's a mixture of those people on Earth, people that don't want to know anything, people that are too afraid to know anything, and others that are just so excited and can't wait. But there's more of those that don't want to know or that don't choose to believe. Okay.
Yep.
And because of that, they can't just come down and land, and do anything. Now they used to be able to do it, but they can't really so much now. It's new rules they've made for themselves. And because they'll break the free will of others. And that as a benevolent force, you would never, ever do that intentionally unless it was an emergency.
Right.
You would never do that. You wouldn't come and do a light show with you wouldn't do anything like that. You wouldn't force anybody who doesn't want to know you exist to know you exist without it being an extreme emergency like cataclysmic emergencies.
Mhm.
So the way to get around being able to come and be of assistance and not breaking free will is by being born into the race you're trying to help. And that's what incarnation is
Mhm.
being born into either your race or another race multiple times.
Okay.
And then now you're a member of that race, and anything you say and do is a member of the race doing and saying. So there's no breaking of free will, you know,
Nice.
uh, because there's plenty of people that think I'm utterly nuts, and that's fine. That's their free will, and that's why we do it this way, to allow them to think I'm crazy. And that's fine. That's totally fine. So that's why we came to the military and said, listen, this is the one of the plans we have. He's going to be born, because I don't know if I've chosen my parents at that time. I don't think I had. I narrowed it down to two or three,
Mhm.
but I hadn't chosen them yet. But I'm sure they communicated somehow, because the military is different, because the military knows they exist. The military is working with them, the military, all of that,
Right.
the general public, they're not going to frighten or
Yeah.
come into,
Now,
so
now
that's why.
as a soul group, when you were making those decisions and you had those memories of that, was there any kind of identity that that soul group that you were from identified with from as being from a certain place in the universe or anything like that, or is it more just like a spiritual realm kind of thing? Or
It's a mixture.
okay,
The thing about soul groups, soul families, is that they're not all from the same race. Rarely are they from the same race. Because
Mhm.
what happens we're leaving the third density, we're moving into fourth. In the upper fourth density, all races, no matter what race, what planet, right now it's Earth, they have the option because they've learned all the spiritual lessons. They've learned everything they need to learn. And before they move into fifth, then they have the opportunity to leave their planet, either as a whole
Mhm.
or as individuals or
mm,
both.
okay,
So, in doing that, if you leave as an individual or a small group, you'll find other groups that are doing things in other parts of the galaxy or even other universes that you you resonate with, things that you want to accomplish, things you want to learn, and things that you want to help in whatever way. So this group's doing those things, so you join this group, and it could be hundreds of other races in these soul groups.
Okay. Very cool.
Wow.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't want to sidetrack you. Just very curious about that. Yeah.
Oh, please, I love the questions. But, so also what another part of the reason that, well, part of the reason that I did what I was doing was for disclosure, to help that process. But also because of because your origin race is the race you evolved your soul up through. So if you're native Earth human, Earth humans are your soul groups.
Mm,
Soul, then your soul family or your I'm sorry. Yeah, say if you're a native Earth human, then Earth humans are your origin race.
okay.
Hmm.
And after you leave your origin race, whatever group you joined, your soul family. You
Mm,
know,
okay. Yeah.
the people we work with all the time and reincarnate with all the time, when you see them for who they truly are, they may not even be a human. You just love them. There's like somebody you've been with, but we forget who they are and we forget their forms when we're born into the incarnation cycle.
Right.
So that we don't, again, it's about free will, but if you have the ability to retain your memories when you're born, which many children do, they just forget it because most of our society says, yeah, you're wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
You didn't see what you think you saw, or you don't remember what you think you remember. So we think we're right, they're right, and we're wrong, which I did
Yeah.
for many years, of course. So then that way that we don't abridge anybody's free will. But if you can remember it, that's actually really positive and a good thing. So
Yeah. Wow.
To just to summarize what you were saying is you did agree to this before you came into this lifetime, and you agreed to have full memory too, I guess. Is that sort of true? How
well,
what?
no, the memory thing isn't really an agreement. The memory thing is a personal journey.
Hmm.
And you can either remember or you don't. You remember partially or fully. I mean, I as many memories as I have of other past lifetimes and this other experience, this alternate timeline that I'm on, even though I have those memories, they're not full memories like, you know, like I have from a year ago or what have you. They're
Hmm.
often fragmented and I have to kind of put them together, as other memories come in. It's a complex thing, recovering memory. And then
So
also, go ahead.
yes, just because others I know plenty that have, or like Tony Rodriguez or others that obviously they have to remember after however many years, maybe it's 20 years before they start remembering anything, and all of it starts to flood back. So was it a similar thing where it was like just little glimpses here and there, and then you had to put it together, or was there a whole bunch of it that remained from those 60 years, and that you had to work with? You already had something to work with, or how was the process of remembering?
Yeah, for me, it was somewhat of a mixture of those two. Some memories I always had, I never lost, even as a
Mhm.
little kid. But, I was told, rightfully, societally speaking, I was told I was just a vivid dreamer or I had a good imagination. So I
You're
could
just
Mhm.
a
do
kid.
whatever I
That's just
want.
your imagination. Yeah. That's not real. Yeah.
It's not real at all.
Mhm.
But they never went away, you know. And I was always, even since I was a little kid, I could see and detect spirits, other non-human spirits, human spirits, all sorts of things. I was
Right.
always seeing these things. And I was raised a fundamentalist Christian. So those things were evil, and I would
Right.
I was already looked at as odd, you know,
Mhm.
that was just going to happen no matter what. Um,
Mhm.
I didn't want to go to the evil side, so I didn't say too much about what I was seeing, what
Right.
feeling, especially, but so I've always had that. Uh,
Okay. And so it was you were put back when you in the 2-year-old body after all that everything happened. And
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
because I spent the 60 years, 20 years, I think probably primarily on Earth because the memories that I have are Earth-like,
Mhm.
deserts and things like that. But then the next 40 years was on the moon of Mimas, just outside the rings of Saturn, which
Right.
space station.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That's
All
kind of
right.
what we were probably ask next, just so we understand what your agreement was to do with working with. You were kind of like an ambassador for other beings, but other ET beings with planet Earth, and you basically agreed to that in some way, right?
Yeah, like you mentioned, my agreement before I was even born, uh, it wasn't something, I mean, it was my idea, this whole thing. It was my idea. It's always our own ideas,
Okay.
that we want to accomplish. And I'm like, all right, this is what I want to do. But in order to do that, certain things had to happen. So you had to choose a certain set, the proper set of parents to kind of make sure your goal happens, and certain things you have to set into your life. So in doing so, that did get me, you know, to go into the what we call the SSP colloquially. Um, but and then the SSP, because part of the agreement with the US military was after my initial 20-year service to them, they would
Mhm.
then host and sponsor me at the embassy on the Mima station. So then that was my transportation, because then at that point guidance is out of it, except for on a spiritual level, they're communicating with you, but they're not physically assisting you. So they have to set somebody up to help with that physical assistance, and that was the U.S. military in my case.
Okay. All right.
But then I spent 40 years on Mimas, and as you said, I worked with under the military. I'll say under the military, and they were technically in charge of me,
Mhm.
which was the agreement. So I had to acquiesce to them, and that was fine for the most part. I didn't have any major problems with that because everything is so different when you're off Earth, the planet.
Mhm.
Military people, the attitudes, unless you're part of like what they call the dark fleet, which there are some out there that have gone rogue and done their own thing. Unless you're part of that, but everybody else, they work together. All Earth humans, because you're no longer on the planet, you gravitate toward one another, and
Right.
and you work together in a different way because it's like everybody's sort of their own race and group. When I say race, I don't mean colorations of skin. I mean utterly different races.
Mhm.
Mhm. Right.
And
Exactly.
so you learn really quickly who you need to be connected to. And then you just want to anyway, because if you travel somewhere and you see an American in foreign country and you want to go say hi, or you don't want to say anything at all, you do your way. So it's sort of that. It's similar to that, but a lot more intense.
Yeah.
But I
So,
did spend 40 years there.
okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Everything I've heard leaves me the impression that everything related to the secret space program is always negative and warlike, and it's very much not a place you want to be. But so it's good to hear that maybe there are other aspects of it that aren't that way, more on the benevolent side. Um,
Yeah. The larger aspect of it isn't
mm,
terrible.
yeah.
It's like
Which
most of all alien races are not negative. It's just the ones that are, we hear about because
right.
they don't care about free will so much.
They don't, yeah, they want to intervene no matter what if we
Yeah.
say we want to see it.
Even if it seems really wonderful and great and amazing, like, oh, because I know the rules. Unless they've changed, and they haven't, because we haven't had thousands of ships landing on the planet,
Yeah.
rules haven't changed at least that much. Uh,
Mhm.
so yeah, so I
That's
would just
amazing.
be careful if you're being contacted physically. Be cautious. They're either human or they're not your friend, whether they act like it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good rule of thumb. I mean, just to be very aware of that. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
And one day you'll know. We will all know when all the benevolence arrive, because it'll be all of them at once.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay. That'll be
Can I
nice.
ask a real quick question? Was it Solar Warden? Did it have a name, that part of the secret space program, SSP? That
Well, so far as I recall, I see I'm terrible remembering names. I'm all visual. Um, so I don't remember the name. I do remember Solar Warden as being a part of a ship. I don't know if it was the
okay,
military's overall name or just the ship's name.
right.
But that ship itself was almost the size of Manhattan Island.
Wow.
Wow.
I mean, people are going to be so surprised about what we have,
Yeah.
you know, out there.
Wow.
Okay. So take us back. So you woke up from the larger tank and you had all these memories come back to you um, into your 2-year-old brain, and then did you quickly develop all this cognition and abilities to be a 25-year-old man at that point, or what happened after that?
Well, it took a few days,
Okay.
it was very emotional, confusing, kind of in and out because it's like my brain had to adjust to the memory. So it's not like it's a click of a switch. I mean, I remembered everything very quickly, but it was a bit of an overload.
Hmm.
So my brain just kind of shut down and I was basically hospitalized, for a few days until, I could adjust to everything. And which wouldn't have been as traumatic had it not been a 2-year-old consciousness prior to memory release. If I had memories released now, they may be emotional and traumatizing, but they wouldn't be confusing. I would kind of understand the process. But then I didn't understand anything. I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
So it took a few days, and then as I began to understand and remember, then I had to learn how to breathe again. Well, that was right out of the tank, but I had to remember how to just get by on a social level. I had to remember all of these things.
Hmm.
So I just basically went through like a little training, program working like physical therapy sort of, but and emotional therapy.
Okay.
And I guess you're going to explain, we'll get into the technology aspect because I think you can help explain some of this quite well. And this is why I love the way you present information. You don't seem like just a crazy nut off the street. I mean, you have a lot of say. You say it very well, and the technology is proof that there's something to this, and you have the intellect to go there and help the world with this technology. But I was just going to say for the general audience that like they were like, well, this must have been just some movie. Like, well, there's a reason why all this stuff is put in movies so that you can handle it, in your reality one way. And if you want to just call it crazy, great. But we're obviously getting ready for release of certain things and trying to get the rest of humanity caught up to where we need to be. So I think this is amazing that you're able to articulate things so well with it. And so anyway, yeah, please continue. But maybe, yeah, how the pineal gland's connected with the technology and even the med bed seems to be kind of tied to this thing with how the consciousness is put back in the body or at certain times and uh,
Yeah.
go wherever you want with that. But nice. Yeah.
Excuse me. Well, it's a big subject, of course, but I was exposed to all sorts of technology while I was there. A lot of medical technology. I worked with memory extraction and also soul transference.
Mhm.
You can transfer all the memories and the soul of an individual to a copy of that same person. Now you can put the consciousness of one person into another being, whether human or other, but you have to kill one of the two or both of them to do that. So it's not done.
Wow. Okay.
But if you have an exact DNA copy, so what they did, because they were ready for me before, like I said, when I was 2, they had all this gel grown. They knew I was coming, obviously, right? So they also had genetic copies of me,
Mhm.
in storage, basically. And I'm sure there's still some in storage somewhere. Um, there's copies of many, many, many people. And I like to use the word copy instead of clone because we have a negative connotation on clone. And a clone can also be different than the original. So I know that technically that's not what a clone means, but technically, vibrationally speaking, it can be different.
Mhm.
So, but if you just simply make a copy of that person, your frequency, and the frequency is the key, because the pineal gland within it has tiny little calcite crystals. People are worried about a calcified pineal gland. Honestly, that partly is a lie,
Hmm.
because we need those calcite crystals to survive and to our bodies to live. We can overcalcify it. That is true. So that could be the concern, but not that we don't want calcite within our pineal. That's a natural thing that we need. And because what happens is there's a hydraulic pressure within the pineal gland, like the CSF fluid, cerebral spinal fluid, is a part of that process. And then it goes within the um, pineal gland, and there's pressure on it. And when you put pressure on calcite or quartz, which is a form of quartz, that creates a piezoelectric energy. So you
Mhm.
get energy out of putting pressure on certain crystals.
Right.
So that's what your brain does naturally. The pineal gland naturally creates a piezoelectric energy, and that's what your nervous system runs on. So when we talk about the electrical impulses from the brain and neurons and all of these things, it's piezoelectric energy that is being created in the pineal gland. Now, through that process of that piezoelectric energy being created and that hydraulic pressure within that, it ended because everybody little crystals are different. Nobody has exactly the same crystal conglomeration within their brain. So it creates a different and separate frequency.
Uh, yeah,
Okay.
my background is then actually in ultrasonics. So the piezoelectric material, it vibrates at a different frequency, and that's, we make transducers and stuff out of it. But if that's
Exactly.
everyone's a unique frequency they're tuned to based on the geometry of their own individual unique crystals, that makes
Yes.
sense. So
So
when
that,
you have, okay, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was going to say, so when you have a copy, as you put it, of a person that has the same piezoelectric magnetic structure and the same vibration, everything's the same.
So
Okay.
then their frequency is the same.
Okay.
And then that frequency is known. Like they knew my frequency, and it's just like tuning a dial. It's a computerized thing, and just like, if you're in the military, they have your whole record, your medical record, they know everything about you. So they have your frequency as well, what you're creating, because no two people have the same. It can be extremely similar, just like fingerprints can be really similar, but they're not exactly the same because life's experiences are different.
Wow.
Because diet and things like that changes things about the brain and all of that. So the frequency is the key in when you're transferring consciousness and the soul, or you're adjusting memories. And they know your frequency. So they what they do is okay, let's give an example. Say a super soldier has been out and come back and experienced some horrific things, seen terrible things, experienced terrible things. It's a pretty extreme trauma. So what they had me doing was actually taking out those specific memories, and many of them were begging us to do it. They're like, please take them, take them, take them. Now, it doesn't take everything, but it takes everything within a specific time period. Okay? They can't, I mean, unless there's new technology unaware of, they can't specifically take out, say, the memory of the one of the three of us not being in this, Zoom. Okay. They can't do that. They can take the whole Zoom out, but they can't take out specific parts. And how the reason for that, as another caveat, I'm sorry, it's just there's so many aspects to this. That time is a wave, and
Mhm.
that wave, as it goes through, like you get up this morning, timestamp, okay, of your awakening, and then when you're going to bed, another timestamp, and throughout the day, every second is another timestamp. Okay. And that timestamp is created by the actual wave of time. And when say if I wanted to delete my whole day yesterday, I would know, I would have the formulations. It's a computerized thing. I would have the formulations of knowing when I woke up what that wave frequency was and vibration at that time. And then when I went to bed, what the frequency was of that wave was at that time. So then I can tell the computer, take it out from this point and just push delete. And it's gone. So that's how they adjust memories. Now, when you're leaving the program, you're leaving the space program, they take out everything. So they basically wipe it out. And if they took you as an adult, or it's say a young kid, and they grew you up as a secret space program super soldier, then they would take everything out from the time just before you were taken, and then leave all the other memories, so that you forget the whole time you were gone. Could be 60, 100 years, and you'd forget the whole thing.
And it doesn't feel like you're missing any time because you're put back where you.
Because they didn't take out parts of it; they took out everything.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
And they do that through frequency wave and magnetism and some other stuff. But it doesn't always work because or maybe it's not fully efficient at times, because when what memories are connected to your DNA, somehow they're locked in there. So when you transfer, this is also why if you do a heart transplant with someone, or even other organs, that person can take on that other person's qualities and memories, because there's a DNA in that, if they try to take it out, flush it, there's still a trace in there. And then that's why people end up with someone else's memories after a transplant. So that's how they do it. And they do it with a device. I always remembered that. I can show you guys. I always remembered this device since I was a little kid. I remember seeing it sitting on a stainless steel table next to me, because I'm sitting on it before they took my memories at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember arguing with them and telling them, I'm going to remember this. And they're like, no, you're not. I'm going to remember this. Like, no, you're not. They're going to make sure, because I'm like, I am going to remember. And I did. I remembered a number of things. But they had this device. I'll show you. Theirs was electronic, and it was programmable, and there were, electronics in it. This one is the one I make. It's not that way. But so theirs, for me, because my frequency, my pineal gland frequency, that range of frequency is assisted here. See if this is a lapis lazuli stone. And this stone, all crystals, all stones have a certain frequency, the way the crystalline structure, okay, the way energy flows through it. And then as it flows through certain crystals, it changes its frequency a little bit. And that's the differences. And that's why crystals are so amazing. So anyway, my frequency range falls within what the frequency of lapis is. So they had a lapis. It was sitting next to me. I was sitting on a stainless steel table, and this was sitting right to my left. But like I said, theirs is programmable. So they went to a computer, and I'm arguing with them. My superior, my handler, is standing right behind me, and then the technician's right in front of me, and he's typing in my code, my number, whatever, to bring up my frequency so that this device was tuned to my frequency now. Okay. And so theirs has a button on the back, because it's electronic and you can turn it on and off. But what you do is when you push the button, this begins emanating your exact frequency. Okay. And then they put it on your temple, just like this. Well, actually, they put it on your temple, then they push the button. And then when they push that button, this now has a stronger frequency than your pineal gland, but it's the same frequency. So your consciousness and soul is attracted to it. So then it's that quick. Push it, it leaves, you pass out, you basically die. And then there's a copy of you, or say in this moment, this particular example, there was a 2-year-old copy of me. And then they went over to the 2-year-old, put it against the temple, and released the button. And now the pineal gland has a stronger frequency, and so it's attracted into the pineal gland. And that's how they transfer memories and delete memories too. They do that same, essentially the same procedure, because then they program this to delete that frequency range in your pineal gland of a time period, and that's how the memories are taken.
Like the timestamps that you said, do they just take that range wherever how bigger they want it to be and that
Yes.
chunk goes away?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And see, mine, the one I build is only for healing and for pain relief and for adjusting the chakras and your energy system, because it's not electric at all. There's nothing electric about it. It's 14 magnets. And so it's natural, and it creates a natural piezo electric effect, like in your pineal gland, it's created there with the crystals. The way I create it is, see, this is a natural magnetic. This is how this magnets want to align, because there's a series, right? And so the field's coming down and back up and then comes around. Well, this is opposite. So the ring magnet is polarized axially so that it's south and north. Okay. But this is just one field, because the south and north have merged essentially. And it sounds really weird, but that's how it's working.
The orientation of the magnets inside that is such that it's just a field within itself.
Yes, it creates a singular field, you know. And I'm not even sure 100% how that works, but it works, you know. So anyway, so this field comes around, and it kind of does this, right? Creates a series, and then it wants to come up and around. And this is how this wants to rest on there. But there's another way to make piezoelectric energy. First is by crushing or putting pressure on a crystal, or you take two magnets, like two north sides. Try to push two north sides or two south sides to a magnet. You can't do it. You can, but it takes incredible energy and pressure. But I do it this way. I turn it this way and drop it and lock it in. So now this is creating piezoelectric energy, the same energy that your pineal gland is creating. And it's not electronic, it's not false. It's the same exact energy as the brain and nervous system. So it works really well with the nervous system. And so as this energy is still coming around, right? Now it's wanting to come around the magnet and continue this way. But because this is axially polarized, meaning this from the thickness of it, it's pushing the energy. So it's drawing it in here. So it's coming up and around, and then also being pushed in. And as that comes around and is being pushed out, it creates a vortex.
Wow.
So there's a vortex right here, about at least, I mean, it's very strongly about that big, couple of inches.
Okay.
And it's now not just magnetic, but piezoelectric vortex. And then it creates a tiny 0 point energy at the end of it. And so that's the vortex. And this, when I signed up for the last 20 years, I was negotiating my contract, and I said, part of my contract is that I wanted to release this to humanity, release this technology. And they're like, sure, fine. Because they didn't think I was going to remember.
Wow.
You're not going to remember anyway. They'll agree to anything. And I didn't get my multi-million-dollar payout at retirement either. But
Right.
but at least I remembered this, right?
Yeah.
So this was part of it. And you'll find, as humanity understands more and more and more about high technology, the higher the technology, the more spiritual the technology becomes, the simpler it is.
Right. That makes sense.
And it all comes down to magnetism and crystals.
Mhm.
Everything is crystals and magnets.
Right.
High technology in different forms, of course.
Well,
But that's it. That's the DEEMS.
yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, it goes right along with what we've heard. We've done a lot of stuff with Dan Willis, and he's big into the quartz crystal technology. And, he's got his ways of getting communications about it. But I mean, it's amazing that seems like there's got to be something to it, to these crystals. And
was all
Oh,
about applying pressure to the crystal to create that piezoelectric energy. That was the whole
yeah,
basis, and tapping into that with your consciousness and your own pineal gland, like just like you were saying. So
yeah.
very cool.
It's very simple at the end of it. At the end of the day, humans make it super complex, and we kind of have to because we don't get it entirely yet. So we have to find other ways of accomplishing some similar technology or result.
Right.
We don't understand that our brains manifest absolutely anything, physical, non-physical. We
Mhm.
don't remember that yet. And so when you get into high technology, you use very simple devices, but you also use manifestation and thought, which is the most powerful thing in the universe.
Yeah. I
Wow.
briefly heard you say or relate that device you made to like the Egyptian Ankh, like that.
Mm.
So they had this is like ancient technology. This is what they had back then, and um, they used it for similar purpose for healing purposes, or was that
Yeah,
do you
for
have
this,
any insights as to how far they took that technology and what they did with it?
uh, they did physical healing, and they did spiritual work, religious. For them, it was religious, but to them, because they had magnets, they had copper, they had everything this is made of. This is a copper tube, iron rod in the center, separating, 13 magnets. And this one is nickel plated. The other one you see up there is gold, 24 karat gold. But and they used gold in theirs, and they used crystals. But they used for their magnetism, they used magnetite. It was magnetite in Africa is very fairly common in certain areas.
Mm,
So they used magnetite, and for them, because they could feel the effects, they could see the effects. It was very spiritual.
mm,
And so that's why you see the Ankh all the time because the crossbar and then the way the loop comes in and then as it goes down, they would hold it by because it was really not about the top part. It's actually called the crux ansata. And I don't remember the exact translation, but it's basically handled cross. So there's a cross, and then a handle on it. So that's what the crux ansata is, and that's what the Ankh is. So it's the cross part that they were using with magnetite and crystals within it. It was a copper tube. And they didn't have electroplating, but what they could do is they could actually wrap it somehow with gold. But I think it was probably more commonly copper.
mm.
And then they used that to heal and also to balance the chakras, balance the energy system. Because when you're finished using, especially if you have somebody does a session on here on you with one of these, um, you feel literally 80% of everybody says, I feel taller
Yeah.
because their energy body and their spirit begins to kind of expand outside of and everybody's like, oh my God, I feel taller. And they feel a profound sense of peace. And that's what the Egyptians were feeling, right?
Yeah.
And then also, if there was pain, they would use it and that pain would go away. I had somebody just yesterday, a lady with arthritis in her hand, and she was saying, I don't know if it'll help. I'm like, let's find out. So, so I sat there and I just held it, on her for 5 minutes. And I asked her to just kind of move her hand so she could tell as it's being assisted.
Right. Right.
And she's like, well, it's feeling a little better after a couple of minutes. Oh, it feels a little better. By the time she was like, oh my God, what? I told you it works, somehow it works.
And you said
Just
you said
describing
something.
about the hand holding it like a handle. Um, that reminded me. I was just read a book, "Fingerprints of the Gods" by Graham Hancock, and he talks about in Mesoamerica, like not just the Egyptians, but um, the other site in Turkey. I forget the name of it. There's images of these gods or deities holding these buckets with this rounded handle, and it's the same image that shows up in Central America with the Aztec Mayan or whatever is predated that. But it seems to be everywhere with that was like the cool of the
Almost
gods
looks
somehow.
like a purse, almost. Yeah, like a
Yeah.
handbag or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. It's interesting because during that time, the same groups, because at that time, benevolent and malevolent forces were both landing on Earth, and sometimes they were just projecting themselves, but they were basically physical here on Earth. And many of the same groups, especially the benevolent ones that were in Egypt, were also in South America. And so that's why, they were in a number of places, but primarily South America and Northern Africa. And so, in fact, they're one of the groups, the Raw Collective, is actually the ones that created the first pyramid, the Great Pyramid. And then they came down and help everybody else. Because this is people think I'm absolutely nuts when I say this, but I'll say it anyway. That when you understand manifestation and thought, you understand how this is possible. And you understand how time is a wave and frequency, you can come in and out of a location frequency wise. That's how UFOs disappear and how some Bigfoots disappear.
Right.
When you understand that process, this makes sense. Outside of Earth time, that pyramid was created out of phase with Earth.
Okay.
So they built that pyramid out of phase, 6 million entities, all thinking and had a plan. They knew everybody knew everything about everything. And so they all created the pyramid with thought outside the phase of Earth. And in Earth time, that took about 12 minutes.
Oh, wow.
To build the Great Pyramid out of phase. And then just before sunrise, on one particular day, I don't know when, they moved it into phase with Earth, and suddenly people woke up and there's a pyramid that was never there before. So it was this massive miracle, right? See, but also people then believed more in miracles and things, and it wasn't like they wouldn't drop dead with a heart attack because we've been told nothing like this exists. But then they're like, it was still astounding. Can you imagine? That'd be pretty astounding.
Sure, yeah.
Right.
So then the Raw Collective came down, and they contacted the people that were around the pyramid. And then they explained, this is what we did. We can help teach you guys, because the pyramid's purpose was soul evolution and to focus energy to help the Earth grid, to support the Earth grid, because basically they were having to to keep new negative entities from coming in, they had to create a shield around the Earth.
Right.
And that's the Earth's electromagnetic grid was part of that. That was natural. They enhanced it. And those pyramids are all about enhancing that grid. They're all out of tune now, but So anyway, they showed up, and then they began to teach the Egyptians, anybody, the people there, how to build their own pyramid. And they did that through appearing, projecting themselves, because they didn't come down physically because they were high vibe, and it was much more difficult to do that, but they can project themselves more easily. And so because of that, and it takes a lot of individual energy to do that, they were only able to appear from the waist up. So you see in a lot of hieroglyphs, you see beings that are like have bird heads,
Yes.
an ibis or a hawk, Horus or Isis or whatever. That's because those beings were real, but they were only projected from the waist up. So in hieroglyphs, they had to do, drawing and all this, they had to do something. They couldn't just float them, so they put human legs on them.
Okay.
And it's the same group that was in South America as well. They were in several places, but they were quite benevolent. People, try to say other things about the Raw Collective, but I have incarnated through them a number of times, and they're some of the most loving, amazing beings. But they did evolve from Venus before Venus became 750 degrees on the surface, when it was actually a physical form could actually live there, which was about 3 million years ago. Then that's when they were in their upper fourth density. Then they left their planet and began helping others. And they thought, oh, let's go to Earth because they're our neighbors. We're going to help them. And so, but they're much higher vibe now. They're like sixth, seventh density. I think they're seventh now. But they're still here. They're still incarnating on Earth, helping, because so much of what they tried to teach was misunderstood and people were killed in their name, just like, it happened how many times through history.
Right.
Religion, created these issues. But so that's who did the I don't know why I was telling you the whole story about the pyramids, but
I don't know. It's fascinating. Yeah.
Very
I'm
fascinating.
still
And that's an important point to make about the densities and the fact that even, I mean, and our grandfather mentioned stuff about that, like the Venusians, and if there are beings there, but it's not like you're not going to see, you won't even see the same planet if they're on a higher density. Then the planet's going to look different, or you're not going to be able to see them. They're going to be in another basically
out of phase.
phase, out
Yeah.
of phase. So,
Well, that's how the space station Mimas is. So
okay.
when we went on a ship, they took me. I remembered maybe it might have been the first trip because it was so impactful. When I was taken by the Air Force Navy to, I don't remember which one. It might have been the Navy at that point, but it took me to Mimas. And so what you see when you arrive at Mimas looks like our moon, a rocky moon. Okay, it looks a lot like it, except it looks exactly like the Death Star because it has a huge crater hole in it, the Herschel crater. And it was funny because the Herschel crater was discovered 3 years after Star Wars, the first Star Wars came out, and the Death Star, and they look exactly the same. And that's what we call soft disclosure.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
but in third density, which the ship was, in which we are as humans, we get there and we see a rocky moon, nothing special except for the fact you're at Saturn. Um, but then they have our ships have two engines that I'm aware of. One is for travel, could be intergalactic, whatever, faster than light, uh, just for travel. Then they have another one for changing densities.
Mhm.
So the whole ship arrives, and then they turn on what I don't know if it's officially called this, but it's what I call it, the density engines. And what that does is creates like an electrostatic skin, like a shield around very tightly, like connected to the whole ship surrounding it.
Right.
And then they can, again, frequency, they adjust the frequency to the frequency of the density they want to visit. Okay.
Wow.
So as we're looking at this rocky planet, they turn on the density engines to the eighth density, or it might have been a lower density, but somewhere very high density. And then suddenly this rocky moon is a metallic space station.
Wow.
Now you can dock with it because you're in the
Hmm.
same density. So
Wow.
that's
Wow.
how it's done.
And both these two engines you described are similar technology, electromagnetic, like magnets and crystals kind of stuff. It's not like any complex integral mechanics or anything. It's just, yeah.
Now, I don't remember 100% with most of the other, with Earth human ships, their travel, I think, are probably more complex than a lot of the other ships
Okay.
because we haven't evolved high enough yet, but we're still faster than light. We can still travel mega distances. But the density engine stuff, again, because these are ships built out of materials and out of all, physical things that have been changed. And because we're lower density entities, we haven't quite gotten there yet. Other higher density ships are created through thought. And there's certain races that actually build them. Some races can build their own. But if you build your own ship through thought, then these ships can travel through densities and dimensions easily because it's built to do that. We have to create another engine to take this lumpy rocky thing, or the metallic thing and move it into another density. So it's a little more complex, but it's the same result, really.
Okay. So once you dock with that in that other density, once you dock onto that moon, um, everyone on that ship can go onto that moon and interact in that density and remain that. Are you in a physical form still when you're there, or is it?
Yeah, no, because you're able to transfer. I'm not 100% sure how it works, but the space station is segmented different densities and environments. So the environment that humans can go into is like a fourth density environment. So we can survive there for longer periods of time.
Mhm.
But I was often having to be placed in stasis. Because it's just you got to if you're born and built and you're created from material from your density it's your native density, and being outside of it is jangling and difficult, and then weird things happen. So you have to go into stasis or leave the density for a while, kind of go in and out. It's like acclimating. But you can remain in it. Like I couldn't go as a human being into the upper eighth density on that ship because the builders of that space station are eighth density. Very high vibe, very positive, loving people. But I can't live in there because they're all light. That's what they are. There's just light. So it's not compatible for me, but I can stay within my environment where I have a range that I can stay within. And that's how that station is done.
So simultaneously on that station, there can be entities in various different dimensions or densities having different experiences, and and other ones don't realize what's going on. So can the higher, like eighth density being, be aware of everything that's happening at every density below it?
Yes, they can interact with all densities. However high, but you can't go up in density for very long or at all, depending on what density and your density level. But a higher density can always go down to lower densities. It may take work, may be difficult, but it can be done.
Right.
And if you ever happen to study anything about Mimas, one of the things that scientists are kind of perplexed about with the moon Mimas is it has a wobble. And then there's this weird thermal differences within that within the moon when they do thermal imaging, when they watch the wobble and they're trying to figure out how they think there's an ocean in the middle of it, which they're right. But it's an ocean because there's a lot of aquatic beings that have embassies there. And so there is an ocean in there, but it's not a single ocean. It's segmented because even in the aquatic world, there's density levels. And so they're separated one to the other so they can survive easily. And that's why there are different, and also the density levels is of why they're seeing all these different thermal differences within it, because, we're detecting something that we don't know we're detecting. So it's pretty fancy.
Yeah.
It's going to make scientists, you have to, obviously, that's why we might not see as much of the life that's really out there, even though we're teeming with life. It's just on other densities, most likely.
Well, yeah, that's what ghosts are. Or I just say ghosts colloquially. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's what, if a person can detect and feel things around them, they're just out of phase or they're in another density. Because the multiple densities exist on the Earth at once. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, and every once in a while sixth, but that's in the internal parts of the Earth, and they're very small pockets. Fifth, fourth, fifth, there's a lot of fourth density already here. Underground, that's what we hear about all the underground cities like Telos and others. They're fourth density, so that's really the main reason they don't really interact with this much. They can't. It's first of all, it's a bad idea because we probably shoot at them. So who's gonna step out of a ship, in a place where everybody has a gun? Not smart. So they don't do it because of that, but also because we can go visit their fourth density space for a while, maybe a couple of years even, especially if you leave and come back. But we can't really go beyond that as a human. We can't really go into fifth right now. But so most every planet that I'm aware of has multiple densities. Like we were talking about Venus. When the Raw Collective was there, it was a full third, fourth, density like Earth is. It was very Earth-like, in fact. The temperate climate like we have. But then as the sun continued to evolve and every planet outside the sun synchronously will evolve to higher density. But that also means it's going to get hotter. And that's a long process. It's not like we're all going to fry tomorrow. But the Earth someday is going to be 750 degrees also. But
Mm.
the entities living in the upper densities at that time, that's compatible with them.
Right.
So there are entities living on Venus now, naturally, that are sixth and seventh density, and there are some fourth density. But the fourth density ones have like domes, and they're in a protected in caverns and things like that. So they're protected that way, but
Mm.
they're not native. The fourth density people on Venus are not native to Venus. They migrated to Venus.
Mm.
Uh, the native ones were the Ra collective, and then the sixth and seventh density entities that are there moved there also after Ra left, about 3 million years ago.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
Um, so getting back, my mind is blown about the technology that you were talking about with the crystal and the frequency when you were in the um, program, or you're having your experience of transferring a person's soul to another copy. Was that done mostly to support like the military agendas with the secrets, the super soldier type stuff, or being working with the military? What was the military's objective, and what was your role in that as you were using this technology? Or you talked about erasing the memories from some of these people, but what else did you get into and were you involved with?
Well, we certain personnel have copies of them in case there's an emergency and they get killed. And so we would transfer their consciousness into a copy of them, which is not going to be the same age, especially if they've been around a few years. I mean, I can give you a perfect example. It's another story, but it illustrates well what I'm talking about. And that was when I was um, on Mimas. We were in negotiation with an alien group who the Dark Fleet, the bad humans, came in, went to their planet, wanted to. Um, I think it was quartz. I'm not 100% sure what they were wanting, but they wanted to buy something from them at a very cheap rate. These entities were part of the coalition of planets, is what I remember being called, the one in Saturn anyway. They were part of that, and they knew that Earth humans are separated, good and bad, basically, make it easy. And the bad ones are the ones that approach them, and they're like, "We don't want to work with you." So they attacked them anyway, and then they killed like 300,000 of their citizens and took what they wanted instead of buying it. So their representatives at their embassy on the space station came to see us, and they don't have emotions like we do. They emanate love, but love has a frequency and vibration versus a feeling of love. Um, they they're sort of what are they called? The Vulcans. They're sort of like a Vulcan that suppress their emotions, and that's their journey, part of the journey. But when they get angry, really fast, and so they weren't angry yet. They were there because they were really wanting to go to Earth and get revenge, you know, because this was just so outrageous to them. They're like, well, it's justice, it's balance.
Mm.
And we're like, well, let's not do that. And then so we're talking to them, and there's two of them sitting down right across from me in like a boardroom and a table, right? And then one of them standing, I believe, behind the other two, like a guard. And then right next to me was my superior, and then next to him was one other man, both military. And we're sitting there, and the reason I'm there is because I could telepathically connect and empathically connect. So I know emotionally what's going on, and they can speak to me without the others if they wanted to. Half the time they were telling me jokes, trying to get me to break. But anyway, so in this moment, of course, there were no jokes, and they were trying to express, in their way, the gravity of the situation. And my superior wasn't getting it. He was kind of
Mm.
callous about it. And so I could tell this guy sitting straight across from me was only like 4 feet away, right? He's sitting there and he's getting upset. And I can tell he's going to break. And I'm like, you got to figure out a way to make him feel like you're empathetic to him,
Right.
Mhm.
and that you're feeling bad, or that you get it, or there's something, because he's getting nothing from you and he's getting really angry. And then so he said something and they said something back, and then he still wasn't getting it. And then this entity right across from me, he ran his hand across his chest, and this beam, like a green laser, came out of his chest. And then he hit me right here with it. And
Wow.
he was going to kill all three of us. But the second he hit me, it blew me back, right? So I fell backwards and I died.
Wow.
And fortunately, because we're in our embassy and the medical team, we had like a, hospital basically that was nearby for just these type of things. So you have about 2 hours after a body dies to transfer consciousness and stuff, because
Mhm.
there's still a trace in there, and you have about 2 hours. So it was only a matter of minutes. So I got knocked back. I was killed. They came and they got me. They took me out, and then they did what I was saying earlier. They, put their version of this, and they pulled my consciousness and memories, everything out, and they went to the copy and they put everything in. It took like 10 seconds to do that. And so that's why they have copies,
Mhm. Mhm.
because of the nature of my work. Had they lost me as a tool, they would have lost all my memories. They would have lost everything that I had done,
Yeah.
and everything, all the other work with all the other races were gone. So then they always had copies for emergencies, and that's the reason.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay. Wow. So what, I mean, how did that situation resolve? Was there any way did they, you know,
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
About 2 days later, 2 or 3 days, because after you're moved from one body to another, it doesn't feel foreign, but it's weird. And it takes a couple of days. It's like you have the flu, your nerves are all jittery, and it's like it's everything acclimating to the new system, basically, is all it is. But it's like you have the flu for a couple of days. So I was still in the hospital, laying down. And then the guy sitting next to me, I know who he is, by the way. He lives in France. We found one another.
Oh,
He
wow.
emailed and told me the whole story from his perspective. And I'm like, oh my God, it's you. How cool,
Wow.
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
So anyway, he came in and he sat at the foot of my bed. He said, well, he asked how I was doing. And I'm, yeah, I'm fine. He goes, well, it worked out okay. I said, because the second that he killed you, he felt bad, because he'd lost his temper. And he said that he was equating that action to the Dark Fleet killing 300,000 of them. And he goes, oh, I don't want to do that. So he didn't kill the other two, because the second he hit me, he changed his mind.
Wow.
But it was too late for me, but not for them. And so they came to an agreement, and everything was fine after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
pretty freaky.
Yeah. Oh,
And
um,
so can I ask then just real quick, are we still, I guess we're still dealing with the Dark Fleet or some of those other forces that are kind of we're still at war with them in a way, would you say at this point or
Unfortunately,
yeah.
yes. But this is something that I think is really important on a spiritual level for all of humanity to understand. And this is like profound. That when it doesn't matter what race you are, what planet you're from, not relevant. Your origin race, like in our case, it's Earth humans, right? It doesn't matter good or bad, you're held accountable for the action of every single one of your other members
Hmm.
on a spiritual level.
Hmm.
And sometimes that equates to him coming to Earth and balancing information, balancing out 300,000 people, you know, uh, because it's the spiritual balance thing to do, right? Um, that's not every case, but it is. So when the Dark Fleet is out there doing really bad things, That's why I had to be there. That's why we have an embassy. And that's why we had to meet with these people to make it right, find another way. How do we make it right? So we're responsible for them. You
Mm.
listening at home, you're responsible for everything everybody else on earth does, even if they're not on earth doing it. So if we begin to understand that, we then learn to have understanding and compassion for one another.
Mhm.
And really it comes down to it, that will change everything.
Yeah, yeah, definitely would.
Sure.
That's a great point to have.
Yeah.
Wow.
Great. Yeah.
Um,
Um,
and yeah, go ahead.
I got a couple more topics, but Derek, do you have?
No, I mean I might not have a whole lot of time, but please go ahead and ask.
So this one's real quick, I think. But so your time in this experience was from 1970 to 2030. So the next 6 years you've already experienced. Do you remember what happens in the next 6 years?
That's a really good question. And no, I mean, I remember a little aspects of it, but I find that once I've kind of passed that, synchronized that timeline, because I'm on two, obviously, then I tend to be able to pull the memories in once it's already happened in the other timeline.
I see.
Now, there are things that I kind of remember, but they're not anything I'd repeat because I don't remember it clearly enough.
Mm. And while you're, say, on a base in the moon of Saturn, you is everyone cognizant of what's happening on Earth? Is that even relevant, or are you guys doing your own thing, or um, does it
No,
monitor closely what happens down here? You know?
it's the same as if you're in the military and you're on a base somewhere, that so you're quite a bit different in everything,
Mhm.
but you have basics.
Okay,
Like our embassy is Earth time. I think I don't remember where it's located, but like they chose somewhere on Earth. It's probably in the United States, just because it's the US that put most money into this embassy there.
Mhm.
Um, but so yeah, it is known. Everything's known about Earth. In fact, that was a very important thing for all of us. I remember having a conversation with the group of guards that were with me, and they were all talking about how sad is it that we can't go back and tell our families about these amazing things we're seeing.
Yeah,
It was like it was kind of created grief and upset,
yeah.
but
Mhm.
so there's a very high consciousness about that.
Mm, okay.
Do you think that 2030 was an important point of your mission was over by that time because of it in our timeline? It's very critical that we achieve certain things by that time. It seems like things are coming to a head, obviously. So I guess that's kind of my question. And if do you think we're on a good timeline now, with politically with the election, if that helped a little bit, or what are your thoughts there?
Well, I don't know for certain. I know the whole thing is timed out generally. Like many, many, many people that are other entities that are star seeds come in specifically for different periods of time to accomplish different things.
Mhm.
Mostly it's just to help raise consciousness of native humans. But in my case, 2030 um, aligns with my past Earth lifetime.
Mhm.
My past Earth lifetime, um, I died in 2030
Oh, okay.
or 1930, sorry. I died in
I
1930. Yeah. So we tend to do that to help us remember past lives. So that's what numbers are about. Numbers help us remember things.
Mhm.
Like our birthdays are not random. We know exactly when we're going to be born, and we do that intentionally.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I remember we talked briefly about the election and the Trump thing, and I knew that we don't have to get deep into that, but I know it was like, well, we can't say anything, any one president's going to be the end all and be all and save the world, but like there's always work that's still left to be done, I guess, and
Yeah. I
way
mean,
to.
it just It just depends. The worst person can do some of the best things, and the best person can do some of the worst things. And it takes what it takes to get us where we need to go. And even though you may love or hate the man, he's pushing us forward in some way that we may not even know yet.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah,
that's good to know.
Yeah.
whatever you know, whatever your religious or political proclivities are, first of all, we should get rid of them.
Right.
Both of those things.
Yeah.
Whatever your proclivities are, you got to understand they're yours, not someone else's, and that you got to find a way to get along, because that's why our benevolent forces haven't come, because we can't get
Right.
along with each other.
Oh
Right.
yeah. So much divide. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. That's why politics and religion were created, is to divide groups, make
Mhm.
people into groups and more easily controlled in different ways. So if you want to be controlled, continue on that path.
Right.
Yeah.
Break out. Come on out.
Yeah.
Waiting.
Good point. It's a very good point to have. Yeah. Any
Um,
last minute questions? Dan?
the last thing I wanted to say was that going back to the technology and your device and the I guess the other device from the program that was similar. When I read that it was helps to regenerate body parts and things like that when they would use it. Does it tap into like your pineal gland to know what the molecular structure of the body part is to replicate that? Um, and does your device work in a similar fashion for healing, that it taps into the body's frequency to regenerate the, I guess, the natural nervous system of what it used to be there, or how it used to be configured?
The wonderful thing about the DEEMS is it's always working 24/7, no matter where you put it. And so part of it's helping heal the Earth grid, the Earth electromagnetic field moving into fourth density. And the more we can do there, the better it is for humanity. And we won't have to have a cataclysm, if we can do it, if we let Earth evolve effortlessly, which we're not doing. But I'm sorry, what was your question?
Oh, just the regenerative properties of the device and how it worked. If it how it does it like align with the frequency of the body to know exactly what it should look like structurally?
Yeah, what it does is it just produces energy constantly, and so it doesn't force anything. So whatever you're capable of doing, your thoughts, your manifestation, your ability, it makes it exponentially easier.
Mm,
Mhm.
So it doesn't force anything, it doesn't do anything, but continually create this energy so that not only for you to be able to manifest and heal yourself, but it does work with the nervous system. If there's pain, it'll take it away. I mean, the longest I've heard of it taking, and it was a severe pain I had even, was a toothache, abscess. Took about 45 minutes, but that's the longest I've ever heard of it taking. It take half an hour and sometimes seconds.
Wow.
So what it does is it works with the nervous system on that level, but above that, it's working with the Earth's, or with the using the Earth's energy, working and bringing that into your energy system, your nervous system, and that works with your brain, and it gives your brain more power to manifest what it is you want.
wow. Okay. That's
So
pretty. Yeah. Okay.
And those devices, the DEEMS devices, scalable. I think you mentioned that, and is this basically the same technology that med beds are using, or that's kind of where it's leading to in a way?
yeah, there's I mean, I had a bed for a while, and I got a new design, so we dismantled it, and we have to rebuild it, but it uses a dozen DEEMS devices,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
spinning at a high rate, creating a field, electromagnetic field, and a piezoelectric field. And then we use a scalar and subsonic and some other stuff too. But um, and uh, and so it just constantly creates those, fields.
And
Um,
that's basically what you've been doing. A lot of your time is going to find centers or help people and create these that use this technology, right, for healing purposes.
yeah, these devices are now on every continent except Antarctica. I mean, we're, many, many hundreds, you know, moving into multiple thousands now,
Wow.
that are around the world. And that was my goal, not to help people, but mainly to help people learn they can do it themselves. They don't need the DEEMS. But
Mm,
Uh,
remember that yet, so this is it's just a tool to help us remember that it's all in here. Yeah, but we're
Are,
not there.
are they commercially available? Can people get them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they're on my website, deemscompany.com.
DEEMScompany.com. Okay. Yeah, we can put a link to everything, all your contact information in there. So,
Yeah, and people are welcome to send me emails. So there's email contact on the bottom of the front page of the website. And, you know, I've met a lot of people that have told me their stories, of being off planet and stuff. And so it's been an amazing experience. So I'm just really happy when people send me emails. So feel free.
Yeah.
great.
No, and Chris, you're an amazing individual, obviously, and so much to share and so much to bring to the world. And I mean, yeah, I think it should be obvious to people. It's not like you're just commercially driven to make a lot of money because, like, there's many ways you could do that. And it's like, why would you have this whole story and the backstory behind it if there wasn't truth to that? And that's the whole reason you're doing this. So I think it's profound what you're doing. And I know you've been gracious also in other events and things, and you've never really gotten any credit for that. Even with some conferences, I know you would mention that about, you do things just very you do it selflessly without, expecting anything in return. So I'm so thankful that we have people like you doing this out there. So thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for recognizing it. And I do my best.
Great.
Yeah, well, I guess we can wrap it up, but thank you so much for your time. This has been a mind-blowing conversation. My perception has been totally expanded about the secret space program and soul level, soul group type information, ancient history, healing technologies. We covered a lot of bases on this, so it was very fascinating for sure. So I think a lot of people will get a lot out of this conversation too. So thank you for that.
Hope so. My pleasure.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for having me here, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yes, yes. Hope to talk to you again soon and keep up the good work. We're definitely going to have to get the device for ourselves and try it too. So,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. I'll help you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
Now, I want you to ask us, what I've told you, is it going to make any difference in your life? You better wake up, better change, get interested, changing your life.